the body as a sacred space. An article from Nera Luce, a dissertation with a multidisciplinary character on the potentialities that the body and its sacred dimension offers along the path of authentic evolution of consciousness. Let's start raising the first curtain to observe the panorama more closely. It must be understood before starting an authentic path of inner awakening that the material law or alchemical lead of the hermetic tradition is a compound of elemental nature in which the macro-microcosmic correspondences that sustain the emanative dynamics of creation are manifested. The concept of a body as a temple is susceptible, without further investigation, to several trivializations. I have often found myself confronted with multiple arguments related to this theme, which occupies a very large cross-cutting space of reflection within the spiritual and esoteric panorama. I believe that it's fundamental to conquer autonomously, through the expression of free thought, every sapiential domain, since our knowledge acquires intrinsic solidity, becoming unshakable in front of every recrimination, only when its appearance can be traced starting from a long process of inner gestation at every level. It does not matter who is right. Truth is an individual achievement, ahead of which every external reference has value only to the extent that we recognize ourselves deeply in it. Let us raise the first curtain and look into the bowels of the earth. The matter of which we are composed is densified energy, whose information is expressed in the form of a reduced physical distance between the electrified particles. This shorter distance contributes to making our experience of material reality tangible and gives it the quality of the fixed. Starting from these considerations, the idea that the body is an important energetic vehicle does not require the appeal to great mysteries, because it is wanting to make comparisons a physical law. The same physical law explains why any energy field crosses us, shakes the dynamics of relationship between the electrified particles that compose us, to the point of informing in different ways the neurophysiological system. This is not enough, however, for us to understand the nature of that information, and neither to translate the multiple levels that are contained within that information. At this point, there is another important question to be introduced, which is related to the nature of consciousness. Consciousness represents an immaterial substance, able to transit fluidly from state to state, precisely because, unlike body matter, it does not have the quality of the fixed, a subtle amalgam of very raffined energy, which possesses its own autonomous intelligence, and which can dual equally in the body and outside it. the academic studies I have done on the near-death experience have brought further light on this nature of consciousness, because this study highlights how, even at a neuroscientific analysis, the element that composes the consciousness does not extinguish itself in the mere brain functioning, thus constituting itself as a vibrational antecedent of the epiphenomenon of the mind. An important point is therefore the idea that consciousness, as the antecedent of every cerebral epiphenomenon, manifests itself through different phenomenologies depending on the level at which it operates. This consideration, when applied to the idea of the body as a sacred space, reveals the complexity of the subject under examination. The body space is a highly specialized system that constantly receives and transmits information of an energetic nature, and the nature of this information depends directly from the vibrational conformation of the conveyed energy. We must therefore make an important distinction between the implication contained in the expression of energy and its multiple levels of density to conquest a multidimensional vision of being. Every world has its own laws, and every matter that inhabits that world on the same conformational level is answerable to these laws. The most important characteristic that we find on the plane of Malkuth in Asia is the force with which the gravitational call pushes the energy and therefore also the consciousness toward that condition that in the myth of biblical exegesis is called the fall. Malkuth in Asia is a fallen world. This means that the plane of vertical evolution and the threshold beyond which the gravitational call ceases to exert its influence is placed at a great distance from that plane of existence. The only instrument we have and the only force that can fill the gap that needs to be filled to cross the vibrational threshold beyond which the gravitational call no longer exerts its influence is the evolution of consciousness. Consciousness can easily move on all levels. Our possibility of access to the divine nature of being is contained within its vertical movement. And this is a quote from Gurdjieff. In the second case, that is, in the case of a man in possession of the four bodies, the automatism of the physical body depends on the influence of the other bodies. Instead of a discordant and often contradictory activity of different desires, there is a single idea, whole, indivisible and permanent. There is an individuality that dominates the physical body and its desires, and can overcome its repugnance and resistance. Instead of a mechanical process of thought, there is consciousness, and there is will, that is to say, a power no longer composed simply of various desires. Only this will can be called free, because it is independent of the ascendant and can no longer be altered or directed from outside. End of the quote. When the consciousness grafts into the embryo, grows together and within the body, while remaining at the same time other from that body. It, in its role of energetic antecedent, perceives the epiphenomenon of the mind and the central nervous structure itself, and informs in a descending phase both the mental and the cerebral phenomenon. The areas of connection between our body and other dimensions, and therefore the sacredness of the body, are a consequence of the energetic dynamics that the consciousness incarnating itself has made possible. Without it, raw material would have remained raw material, with no connection to non-terrestrial planes of existence. Consciousness is the cause of the faculty of free will, of the manifestation of the human intelligence within occult neurology, but above all it is the first mobile of authentic spiritual evolution. Its manifestation, when channeled along the vertical ascent, reverses the direction in which proceed the vibrational dynamics connected to the fall process. When we talk about the body as a sacred space in absolute terms, then we are not saying anything at all. We are only sensationalizing an idea that is potentially true, but that is hardly ever true in the average sleeping condition in which humanity lives today. The body and its mere inanimate materiality does not participate of any sacred act, and it is not capable of expressing power. A useful exercise that in the Buddhist tradition tends in this direction is to meditate on one's decomposing body, trying to visualize in detail the whole process of putrefaction of body tissues after one's death. Therefore, fight actively and from within the multiple manipulative influences that society and the false master submit to you, in order to gain a knowledge that emerges entirely from the process of individual investigation and reflection. The sacred space of the body is in fact constituted as a moment that depends entirely on the level of inner awakening of the embodied consciousness. The conquest of authentic knowledge is a long, perilous, tiring journey, and cannot live with simplification, trivialization, and generalizations. Man is something that must be overcome. To say that all is one does not necessarily imply that all is equal and all is at the same level. Every manifest expression vibrates on the basis of the nature of energy that inhabits it. For this reason, not all subjects can be considered sacred, and the sacredness of the body depends entirely on the level of evolution of the consciousness, and the plane of an active transit of higher qualities through which a lifting of the spiritual octaves have been achieved. When alchemical lead has become philosophical gold, we acquire the ability to use the sacred space of the body as a vehicle for inner metamorphosis.